So on this episode of Laments, we've got the one and only Godfrey Bloom. Godfrey, how are we doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you very much indeed. Sun shining here in Yorkshire, I'm glad to say.
I wish I could say the same. Here in Norwich, we've just had hailstone and rain. So I wish the weather would make up its mind. For those who are watching, those who are listening, who might not know who you are, in a nutshell, who is Mr. Godfrey Bloom?
Well, I'm an old geezer now. I'm nearer 80 than 70. I spent 10 years in the European Parliament and sat eventually, of course, as an independent. So I'm not attached to any political party. I never was before, and I never was since. I had a very undistinguished career militarily in the late 60s and 70s. But my main claim to fame, if I had one, was as a fund manager in the City of London, which I was for 40 years, and managed to win the occasional prize for fund management in a rather unloved sector, which was fixed interest, not equities, the glamour boys. So I'm a bit of a boring old number cruncher, really.
Why,
Uh,
well,
and so, uh, and now I've got a small holding. In Yorkshire, and a few chickens and a few bits and pieces, horses and hens and stuff like that. Dogs. We seem to have lots of dogs. And that's about it. And I tried retirement. I tried retirement 10 years ago, and I couldn't bear it. So I went back into the city in a consultancy role, which has taken off. I have to say, much to my surprise, because all the boys I work with are young enough to be my grandsons, and in the city, and I'm still drinking with them pint for pint. I'm happy to say.
that's us Yorkshiremen have got to represent, surely. So I'm quite interested actually in the economic side of your experience. I know you've been a military man briefly and things like that. We keep being told that the economy is tanking, that it's going down the drain, but how is it in the city? Is it still going well?
Well, it's a bit like the curate's egg, Dean. It's good in parts. And of course, the City of London is an international piece of real estate and it does international things. And it gets a lot of stick, sometimes quite rightly. But if it wasn't for the City of London, this country wouldn't make any money at all. It makes little enough. We don't have our manufacturing industry is much bigger than people imagine it to be. And that was up there, and the figures were available up until last year. Our big strength is in medium-sized companies, small, medium-sized companies, and small businesses, which are gradually being crushed. Everybody thinks the wealth-creating sector is big business, Sainsbury, Tesco, so on and so forth, all the big boys. It's not actually. 80% of the economy is small companies and medium-sized businesses. And of course, they're being put to the sword at the moment by net zero. So we have the most expensive energy in the world, not in Europe, in the world. And yet another little company went out, Denby Potteries went out, a very old company, because it's very energy demanding, and people can't just afford it. Most small businesses rely very heavily on energy and energy prices, and in worlds which are very competitive. And of course, if the Poles or the Chinese or the Indians or anybody else can get their energy prices at half price, it's something that doesn't matter how efficient or good or fashionable the products that we make, you just can't compete. You just can't compete. And so consequently, and that hasn't fully come through yet. It will. It's coming through as I speak. But by the end of next year, I think we'll find that we have a very serious crisis economically. The other thing that nobody's talking, everyone's talking about the American debt of $39 trillion. What they don't talk about, because nobody understands it except geeks like me, is the shadow banking system and liabilities, which aren't necessarily on balance sheet. So a lot of it's off balance sheet. Give an example of that when you look at our debt to GDP ratio, which is fraudulently portrayed sometimes as something like 98% or something like that. It's much more than that, because what you have to take into account, which we don't, you can dig down and find it, but you won't find any airhead female TV presenter on the BBC understanding it, or males come to that. because they're all airheads and don't understand anything. The point is, if you take into consideration public sector pensions, and we have 6 million people just at this moment in the public sector, which is not the wealth creating sector, public sector is wealth consuming. This is something that people don't fully understand. You're either in the wealth creating sector or you're in the wealth consuming sector. I'm not suggesting everybody in the wealth consuming sector or public sector is a bad person. What I'm saying, that's how the numbers work. And you cannot have a burden of public sector getting bigger and bigger by the minute, and it did under the last government as well, because it has to be paid for. But what people don't take into consideration, and when this government got in, they increased public sector pensions by something like 5% straight off the bat. The impact on the pension liability of that is enormous. It's enormous because it's index linked, which you can't buy in the private sector. So you're actually providing the public sector with something which is unsuppliable. And of course, when you sit down and your viewers sit down and they pay their rates bill, they write their check for their rates or they adjust their banker's order, that isn't going for potholes and isn't going for anything at all. It's going for public sector pensions. It's going into the local pot. So if you add that in, you will find that our national debt to GDP ratio is somewhere in the region of Greece. It's somewhere in the region of about 130%. So we're not running roughly with the average in Europe. We're running with the real dummies of Europe. And that, because nobody understands it, the BBC don't understand it, public sector broadcasting don't understand it, and financial journalists are Mickey Mouse. Most financial, they're not like the old ones that I used to have to deal with many years ago, who were quite sharp. This lot don't understand it. You know, they get to be a financial journalist because they got dicked at the Christmas party. It's the same with defence. Who should we give it to? We'll give it to, oh, Sally's good. Why don't we give her a crack at defence, for example? Last week, she was writing about handbags. I mean, the whole thing's completely ridiculous. So we are in the shit. We are in the shit, I'm afraid. And it's just because it hasn't turned up yet. And when it does, when you go bankrupt, an individual, a company, it happens very slowly and then all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And we are going down the lavatory and nobody seems to understand it. Or nobody seems to know why. Nobody goes into an election really talking about cutting public spending. There's not a single political party that we have at the moment that is banging the drum about we've got to cut spending and reduce tax and regulation, of course, as well. Nobody's even talking about it. So the future looks bleak.
No, I can't help but agree with you on that. I mean, for those that watch this channel regularly, I worked in the healthcare sector, both public and private. And I saw in the public sector how inflated some of the salaries were. And then you think the pension on top of that, Jesus, it's insane. And then recently, as you said, when Labour got in, the promise of these pension boosts it's maddening, really. I can't really get my head around the understanding of it. Now, a lot of economists, I wanted to get your take on this, would argue that active government intervention is necessary with things like this, mainly to address things like the inequality and economic shocks. Where do you stand on that?
Well, it is my experience and the historical experience when you look at these matters that the government is never the solution. The government are politicians and civil servants. They are never, ever the solution. Civil servants have no experience of commerce at all, and yet they're the people that negotiate trade deals with other countries. You couldn't think of a more appalling genre to do that when people who have come from a sector with no shareholder discipline, no internal discipline, unsackable, index linked, and everything comes up with the rations. They are a disaster. They are all dreadful. I would sack every man jack of them. That's just point one. Point two is the acceptance, general acceptance across the civil service and indeed across the political sector, the concept of Keynesian economics, which really basically means debt doesn't matter. Governments can spend money, that government spending money can actually rescue an economy or boost an economy or trigger some growth in an economy. And this is a fundamental lie, which is why we're in the poo. And most of Western Europe is in the poo. And Winston Churchill, who was basically an economic illiterate, to be brutally frank, but he did get one thing right when he said, Of course, government intervention means government spending, which means taxation. He said anybody who thinks that you can build your country's economy by taxation is like standing in a bucket and trying to lift yourself up by the handle. It's fundamentally absurd, but this is what we do. Everybody believes that, all the mainstream politicians believe that public sector spending, which is taxation or borrowing, and of course, we now have a situation where our borrowing interest on our debt is higher than our national defense debt, as indeed it is with the Americans, which is much higher at 32 trillion. So it's quite enormous. Debt is a bad thing. And of course, I was just about old enough to be brought up in the 1950s, where debt was a bad thing. Debt was not good. You tried to avoid debt, and the only debt that really you should have, a man of my age was told, as a youngster, you have to have a mortgage to buy your house. Yeah, okay. I think everybody would accept that. Nobody can buy a house for cash. Everything else you should pay for or save up for. But I saw the coming in of everything on the chucky, of course, as we call it in Yorkshire, everything on the chucky. It just simply doesn't work. If you can't afford that flashy new car, don't buy it. Don't get yourself in hock for it. If you can't afford that nice piece of furniture, wait until you can. Because otherwise you've mortgaged not just your house, which is acceptable, you've mortgaged yourself and your family. And you will always live from pay packet to pay packet, which is one of the major problems the Americans have at the moment. They're living payday to payday. That is no way to live. We all know what it's like when you're a student. We all know what it's like when you're young. But generally speaking, you dig your own hole. And this is something which isn't taught in schools. Money and finance isn't taught in schools, which it should be, as should be the principles of English law. These basic fundamental inherited rights should be a part of the curriculum, which it's not. And of course, the trouble is, and I'm sorry I'm going to make some enemies on this one, who would teach it? Your average state school teacher, generally speaking, and there are good exceptions, are pretty thick. Otherwise, they wouldn't be school teachers in the state system, would they? They'd get a real job for a living. And so this is the problem that we have. And it just goes on, and we get more and more in debt as a country, as individuals. The tax rate gets higher, so your take-home pay gets significantly reduced. And it's a vicious circle that keeps on going, and we can't seem to break free of it. And the only way the government's broken free of it, or tries to break free of it, is by degrading paper money. So let's say, and I'm a gold bug, as most people say, I'm a precious metals analyst, and this is what I do, a currency analyst in the city, and I've been doing that. This is how I went back to work again 10 years ago, and of course it's become very fashionable now. My expertise has become fashionable. Which it wasn't 10 years ago, believe me. So we've got all these things. So if let's take gold, which under Roman law, go back to Roman law, only gold is money. Only gold is money. And it was reinforced by J.P. Morgan in 1912. He said only gold is money. And then if you add the banking system, Henry Ford said in 1926, which I always think is a good quote, if people understood how banking worked, they'd never put their money in a bank. And he said that in 1926. So we have all these things. So the only way that they dig their way out of it is by the degradation of paper money, money printative. They call it quantitative easing, which is a very posh way for saying of counterfeiting money. And if you and I did that, Dean, we'd go to prison.
Absolutely.
We'd go to prison. But the government does it on a daily basis. All governments with paper money. All governments do it because it's no longer backed by gold. And so if you take the spending power, let's take 1971 when Nixon brought us off the gold standard, we knew that the dollar was based on gold, and this is how it worked. It was just a piece of paper donating the fact that there was some gold in the vault, which of course is long gone now. But your spending power of the dollar, and that is the reserve currency still of the world, so we have to just make sure we understand that. A dollar bill in 1971, because it's gone off the gold standard, and it's not hard currency, has a spending power today of 6 cents. 6 cents. And the pound's even worse. And if you've got any older viewers, chaps of my age perhaps, nearly in their coffins. The long and short of it, when I first went into a pub at age 17, of course, wasn't 18. I tried to look 18. A pint of bitter, to which I'm still addicted, incidentally, was 11 old pence, which is equivalent to about 6 pence today, roughly speaking. And of course, now I gather in London, I've heard it's actually hit £10. But generally speaking, you can still find pubs in London which you can get a pint for £7. But that shows you the degradation of money. And only 10 years ago or 15 years ago, a family car was about £12,000, a family car, Ford Mondeo. That today is £30,000. This is the degradation of paper money, which we all suffer from. And when they come out, governments who are all liars and cheats, of course, including the Bank of England, bunch of charlatans, they say, oh, inflation last year was 3%. You won't have a single Dean, you won't have a single housewife watching this clip who believes that inflation is 3%. She knows that's a lie because she goes to Tesco or Sainsbury's every week for the shopping, and she knows that prices are going up significantly more from that, and it doesn't matter what it is. Nobody seems to understand the fundamentals of economics. There's only two financial journalists I know, Alistair Heath and Liam Halligan, are the only two financial journalists who even begin to understand the implications of sovereign economic situations. And they're not as clever as me either.
It's interesting. I've seen quite a few of Liam's videos actually, and he does seem to, as granted, I'm not an economist, but what he says seems to make sense, even from a layman's point of view, as such as mine. So, given your experience and your expertise, when it comes to the sovereign debt levels, as we've just touched upon across Western economies, what historic parallels would you say are most instructive on how we dig ourselves out of this?
Well, sooner or later, if you look back over, you can't look back that far really with paper money. It's a very vague subject. It's believed that paper money started in China in the Middle Ages, but nobody's really quite sure. This degradation of money that you have, let's go back for those people who are watching it, who may remember things from school, for example. Henry VIII, let's just don't go any further back than Henry VIII. We could go back to the Roman Empire when the Diocletian Empire. We had a situation where the silver denarius was silver and had an intrinsic value. It was degraded with alloy. It was mixed with alloy, right down there was only 5% silver. And of course, two things crushed the empire, the Roman Empire. Two things crushed it. One was the degradation of money, and the other was the failure to be able to protect their borders. Now, does that ring any bells with anybody? That's one. And then you can fast forward to Henry VIII, who wanted to fight battles in France, like his forebears, Henry V and so on and so forth. He wanted to do that kind of thing. He wanted that. He was a psychopath. So he wanted to do all that kind of stuff, but like a Trump, really, a fat Trump. So he got all these problems. And he degraded the currency by clipping. He didn't degrade it with the gold content or silver content. He clipped them. That's why you have the serrated edge on your coin, is to stop it being clipped and people taking away the gold or silver, which is of intrinsic value. And that's how it happened. Now, he, of course, was followed not by his son, but who really took over and got a grip of the economy, and that was Queen Elizabeth I. And she brought in Thomas Gresham, who was her chancellor, if you will. And of course, the City of London is still built on this as Gresham Street, the Bank of England, and all these things that came about organically, historically. And that came up with a truism, which there are very few in economics. They're very few true. It's not like science or physics. They're very truisms. And that is bad money drives out good. Bad money drives out good. And she stabilized things by stopping coin clippings, so on and so forth. And then we had the Royal Mint, and everything was tightened up. And of course, we had, would you believe, round about that time, just a little bit after that, Isaac Newton was the head of the Royal Mint, which people don't normally equate him to a Trinity College man. So all these things morph as they go along, and people have to countries come off the gold standard or hard currency standard to fund wars. And we came off the gold standard in 1914, and we never recovered. We've never recovered from 1914. One of the most stupid wars the country's ever fought. Stupid by any comparison. Needless. Most wars are needless. Most wars are a waste of time and money and death and young men. Old men sending young men to war to get killed. It's absolute rubbish. It's all rubbish. Okay, I'm not a pacifist. Sometimes you have to fight a war. But we had to fight the Falklands. You know, Johnny Foreigner invaded a piece of land with the Union Jack over it, and everybody there wanted to stay with the Union Jack. No question about that. You have to fight for that. But generally speaking, wars are a complete and total waste of time. This recent one against Iran, of course, the Americans and the Israelis against Iran is fundamentally stupid, suicidal, mental. And of course, the whole world is going to suffer if they don't pull themselves together. So these are the sort of things that happen. To get more historical, more recently, let's look at the Weimar Republic in the early 1920s, where they were taking wheelbarrow loads of marks, German marks, paper money, to pay for one meal. And the whole paper currency thing broke down. In those days, the franc was backed by gold. The United States dollar was backed by gold. And you could actually buy for $100 a big townhouse in Berlin for $100, because that's how the stupidity worked. They stabilized it, and I won't bore everybody with things like the Rentenmark and other. They did stabilize it by firming up the currency realistically. There is nobody at the moment, Dean, even talking about this. Nobody is even talking about this. Nobody's talking about publics cutting back. And the last lot were no better, incidentally. Taxation and public spending were the highest ever. It was record-breaking under the Conservatives. And this lot, of course, come into office, and they're even worse. So there's no main political party who's actually saying we need to do something about this. The only person talking about it really to any depth is Rupert Lowe with Restore, but they're tiny. You know, then at the moment, things might change, but they're not really a contender. Things might change. Nobody else is really talking about it. And if you give somebody, and it's a question of human nature, politicians, civil servants, bankers, if you give somebody the mechanism to print money, currency, if you will, right, better than money. If you give somebody that machine to do it, they'll do it. And we would all be culpable. If somebody gave me, well, I'm too old now to worry, bother about it. I've got enough money of my own, proper money. That was the case 50 years ago, but it wasn't, because there we are. One has to bear in mind that this has to end at some stage. And it seems to me with politicians, only disasters break the system. So it has to be a disaster. There has to be blood running in the gutters. It has to be a problem, a civil war, or something of this nature to stop it, when everybody has to pay attention. But that we are a long way from that at the moment. And when it comes, it will come very quickly. It'll come very quickly. And everybody go, what was that about? How did we get into this situation? A little bit like 1973, 74, a little bit like 1987, a tiny bit like 2008, when everybody in Her Majesty said, before we got this goat on the throne, well, Her Majesty said, she was making a speech, and she said, I wrote to the palace. She said, when we had this sort of major breakdown in 2008, she said, how is it that nobody knew? How is it that this suddenly has taken everybody by surprise? And it was a genuine question. She wasn't trying to be smart. She's not an economist. She said, how did this happen? And I wrote the question, and I said, I've been saying this for ages. It didn't take me by surprise, but I'm not allowed on the BBC because I tell the truth. Whoa, bam, that's me out for a start, isn't it? Telling the truth on the BBC? I don't think so. That's not going to happen. But it's going to happen. Shaw's made God little green apples. Anybody watching this who's got any money, get it out of the bank and get it out of paper money, and buy, if you can, sovereigns or half sovereigns and pop them in the tea caddy. That will freeze the value. That will freeze the value because it's not an investment, it's a protector of wealth. And to give you an example of that, when I was lecturing at universities, I was lecturing on Austrian School Economics as a guest lecturer. I would always hold up. I happened to have 1908 on the date of a gold sovereign, Edward VII's face on it. And I would pass it around and show it to people and say, that would buy you bed and breakfast in a very good hotel in Berlin, Paris, London, or New York in 1908. It will today, because it's worth about 750 quid today or 800 quid today. So it will today, and it will in 100 years' time. So it's a preservation of wealth. And you can get £20,000 worth of gold coins into a tea caddy, you know. And that's to protect your family in the future and children and so forth. And it's a good time to buy at the moment because gold's corrected now in the last 6 months. That won't last long. So there's a buying opportunity. Just when I say I handed that coin round, I didn't have the bravery and the conviction to hand it round at a Welsh university, but I handed it round in all other universities.
Just you excuse me, you touched on the war in Iran and things like that, but before we move on to geopolitics, as I know that's one of your areas, what's your opinion of Brexit? Has it delivered the economic opportunities that people who voted for Brexit envisioned, or has the expectations just been unrealistic, or have we just fallen short, or is it what people have referred to Brexit in name only?
I fought for the referendum for many, many years, as you probably know, 20 years, maybe even longer than 20 years. And quite a bit of my personal money went into the campaign. I know Nigel Farage thinks it was all him. Now, nobody else was involved at all. It was only Nigel. I can assure you that wasn't the case and isn't the case. There were lots of good, honest, patriotic people standing in the rain, delivering leaflets when nobody wanted to know in the late 1980s and the 1990s. Nobody was interested. We didn't get Brexit because, me or Nigel or anybody appeared on Question Time at 11 o'clock at night. Bullshit. No, that was hard graft. And the genuine patriotic British people who voted for Brexit, the butcher, the baker, the cabbie, the sparky. It was real grassroots, single proprietor companies, small companies that said, we can't cope with these regulations. We can't cope with all the money we're sending abroad. Second only to Germany and giving up our fishing leaders, sacrificing our fishing industry, so on and so forth. Being a member of the European Union was an absolute bloody disaster, which is why we voted out. Now, what happened 10 years ago? What happened? We won the referendum and we withdrew our MEPs and we withdrew our commissioner. Nothing else happened. Nothing at all happened. And if you look at I was only out there for 10 years. We were passing 2,000 new laws that went into British law without any form of appreciation or debate or cost-benefit analysis, 2,000 a year. So it was 20,000 pieces of legislation in my short time alone. We haven't rescinded a single one, not one. And who negotiated exit, which shouldn't have been negotiated at all, which was just gone. We should have just gone. But as soon as I saw that we were negotiating our exit, I knew that the House of Lords, the House of Commons, and the civil service would betray us in the negotiations in order to make sure we could go back in seamlessly. That was the whole deal. And so we didn't get Brexit. We've never had Brexit. It doesn't look like we're ever going to get Brexit because we haven't rescinded anything. And we're still running with these petty rules and regulations, the ECHR, it's all still there. We didn't get it. And so when I hear these ignoramuses like Piers Morgan and other complete doorstops talk about, oh God, it's been a car crash. We didn't get it, Piers, you moron. We didn't get it. So stop stop pretending that we got it and it didn't work, because that's bollocks.
It does very much seem like that. I'll cards on the table. I voted to leave, and it was nothing to do with immigration. It was more a case of, for me personally, if someone's going to be making decisions on the country I live in, I want them to be voted in and out. And other than Nigel Farage, I couldn't tell you another MEP. Speaking of Nigel, he's obviously gone from the European Union MEP to where he is now with Reform. Is he the person to save the UK?
Um, well, of course, the quick answer is I don't know, but I would suggest I think probably not, because he's an extremely competent speaker. He's a great platform performer, and he was really made for opposition.
Right.
He's a born opposition man, and very valuable, might I say, too. That's a very valuable role in our society, opposition. Government is something completely different. Government needs an eye for detail, and more importantly, a conviction. A conviction. And it has to be deep down, and it has to be really, really strong to be able to withstand the problems that policy brings forward. So the only thing that can save the country is we have to repatriate millions of people who shouldn't be here or of no benefit to us here. They're just on the welfare and they're no good. So we've then got to say, how do we do that? What are the logistics? For a short time in my undistinguished military career, I was with specialist forces. So I was part and trained in the actual movement of people, the movement of divisions or corps or battalions or whatever it was, the movement. How do you move them to Germany? How do the infrastructure with NATO and this kind of thing? So for a start, how are you going to move that number of people? What are you going to move them in? And how are you going to cope with the pressure we are under now with a politicized police force who is, let's be brutally frank, anti-white? And I think everybody in the country now, except the civil service, understand that. The civil service are politicized, heavily politicized. They go from mediocre universities these days into the civil service and cry the greasy pole, buy their suits at Marks and Spencers, and that's about it. They don't know anything. They don't know shit from clay. But what they do know is they all vote Labour, and this is the problem that you have. So how are you going to do it? Where's the conviction? Who are you going to get to do it? That isn't going to come from reform. It's not going to come because you've still got who are some of the leading lights in reform? Robert Jenrick, who was responsible for bringing these people in, who thought it was a good idea, who was standing in front of hotels saying we're going to go requisition more hotels as they come in. These are the people leading reform. How on earth are they going to stand up to this Damascene conversion that they appear to have had?
Conveniently.
We've got to send them back. Oh, come on, Robert Jenrick. And who's that other guy, Namabi Bubabi, I can't even pronounce his name, who was slung out of the Conservative Party for having his hand in the till.
Nadeem Zawali.
Yeah, that's the guy. So, all these guys are wrong uns, and they've all got, where's the money coming from in this money thing? It's all a bit, everybody seems to be greasing their pockets, don't they? I don't know what's going on. There's millions. We're talking about millions. There's something rotten in the state of Denmark. But anyway, leaving that aside, so I don't know. The answer is no, I don't think so, because I've not seen any real grassroots commitment to the nasty side of life, which is this policy, which is going to save us, which has to save us, is going to be implemented. You can talk a good story, but, sometimes you've got to take your jacket off and get into the fight. I can't see that with these comedians that we've got at the moment.
Does that include Restore Britain? Because one of their I think it's a manifesto policy. It's something they talk about really heavily is remigration.
If I purely look at the manifesto, if I look at the manifesto and the leader of Restore, I see a very big chink of light at the end of the tunnel. But it's a very long tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very long tunnel. And at the moment, it could grow, but it's going to have to grow very quickly, very broadly. That's not easy with a political party. And Rupert will find this out, I think. He probably is already finding this out. Suddenly, and UKIP found this out years ago. Nigel threw open the gates, come one, come all, come and join UKIP, which was great. And what all that we got then were failed Conservative politicians who couldn't get selected for general elections, or the far as they could get was possibly some junior member of a regional rural council or something like that. The people that came from these things watered down the ethos of UKIP, the commitment of UKIP. It watered it down. So by the time I became an independent because they stood foursquare for nothing in particular. It was only Brexit that they stood for. But there's no point in talking about anything else. Banking reform, monetary reform, government spending reform. They wanted to start nationalising things. Nigel, the other day, was talking about it's a good idea to nationalise British Steel. Now, I'm not suggesting it's good or bad with that, but that isn't exactly right wing. We talk about splitting the right wing, Restore, splitting the vote. Reform aren't right wing. All right, let's get that very clear. And if only you look at the generics of this world and the Nawaha de blah blah people of this world, they are not right wing. They are old conservative. They're old style conservative. They're the Conservative Party, leaving Brexit aside, the Conservative Party of John Major. One might even argue, for the oldies watching, Harold Macmillan. You could argue that. But they're going to save the country. No, it's not going to save the country. We have an existential crisis, Dean. In my view, we have an existential crisis in this country. We are on the brink of disappearing like the Hittites, written out of history. Can't even find anything except where the archaeologists go thousands of years later and go, goodness me, who are these people? That's where we're going at the moment. And I don't know what I do like about Restore. I like about Rupert Lowe. He's got business experience. He runs businesses. He's run a football club. He's actually hands-on. He has been in power in the wealth-creating sector. And if you see his performances on and in committee with the civil servants, he is actually savaging civil servants. He's the first one who's telling civil servants, what have you done with £1 billion? What do you mean you can't find it? It's £1 billion. Don't tell me about the procedure. It's £1 million. And I would send you to prison, Mr. Civil Servant. You ought to be in prison. And Rupert Lowe's right. But whether or not he can morph into a major power, Makerfield's going to show us whether he can or not. If he does really well, I don't think he can win. But if he does really well, I think there could be a chance, but I don't think it's going to be reform. And I do hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But the trouble is, the reason I've got no friends, Dean, is because I'm hardly ever wrong.
People don't like the truth, Godfrey, at the end of the day. And that's exactly why I wanted you on. You're not going to bullshit me at the end of the day. You're just going to tell it as it is. And they're the conversations I like to have. With regardless of party politics or which party is in power, speaking again on the geopolitical situation with the UK as itself, it feels like we're being pulled back towards the European Union. However, that's affecting the quote unquote special relationship, because they use that term still, with the United States. We've also got the rising power of China, and even India. Are we just going to become smaller and smaller and forgotten about?
Well, I have a completely different view to certainly from mainstream media. I believe that where we are now, let's assume that we can sort ourselves out, on the immigration problem, which is the existential threat. I believe that we should have a model. Our model should be, I think we'll all accept it's the East that's rising. The East is the way forward. These are the countries, these are the geopolitical entities that are going to go forward. That we could have modeled ourselves perhaps on modern day Singapore in many ways. What we should have is a very low regulation economy, a very low taxation economy, a very small government. And from a geopolitical standpoint, I think we need to review where we've been in the past. We're bound with hoops of steel to the United States, which in my view now is a big mistake. They are now a rogue nation controlled in the main by Israel and the Israel lobby. And I think this is the problem that we have. They're no longer the guys with the big white hats, riding to the rescue, and they've abandoned their own constitution. Which is indisputable. They've abandoned their own constitution. Money is the religion of the United States, and it always has been. So Congress and Senate are bought men. They're bought by the industrial military complex, of which Eisenhower warned us, the industrial military congressional, which was the full speech before it was changed. Eisenhower, who knew how many bees made five. That was in 1960. It's the big, powerful military complex on Wall Street. These are the people that run America. They are not our friends. America has never been our friends. America is wholly responsible for the destruction of the British Empire. Roosevelt hated it. The Americans hated it. And if anybody wants to do their history on this, and they were quite open. This isn't a theory. He was quite open. They wanted to see the end of the British Empire. We might have thought at the time that was for altruistic reasons. It was because they wanted to replace it with their own empire. And they had no idea how to run an empire. We ran a bloody good empire. It made lots of mistakes, as empires do, but fundamentally, it was sound. I've been all over the world in my lifetime, all over the world. I have been made as an Englishman more welcome in ex-Commonwealth countries than you could imagine.
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it.
The Dominions, Africa, I'm made extremely welcome every time I go. And if I'm English, people come along and want to the homogeneous population want to come across and have a drink. If we were so terrible, why do they like Englishmen? Why do they defer? And I can tell you why, because if you look at India, the BBC would have you, we exploited India, we were horrible and all the rest of it. Well, they don't see us like that in India. I've been all over India. I've got friends in India and in the Punjab and places like this. They think we're the people that built the railways. They think, God, unbelievable. The whole railway system in the Indian subcontinent was built by the British. They think we're jolly good chaps. It was natural that they would want independence and all the rest of it. And I understand that. And of course, Africa, and they're dying out now, but the ones that can remember the British Empire in Africa, and I've been to lots of states in Africa. I was at college with some of them, military college, Royal College of Defence Studies. And they have said to me over a cup of tea, the trouble is it's been a dog's breakfast since you left, since the British left. Take Nairobi. I was there when the Union Jack hadn't been hauled down for very long. Beautiful streets, gardens, buildings, everything was, pristine. There wasn't a crime situation. I'm going back 40 years, 50 years. Now you can't leave your hotel complex. The streets are rubbish. Buildings are falling down. And that's the same, with the exception, I would argue, of Botswana. It's the same of most of these African countries. And South Africa is going to the dogs. All these countries, Zimbabwe is going to the dogs. Everything's going to the dogs since we left. I'm sorry that it's unpopular. And people go, oh, you racist bugger. No, I'm just telling you how it is historically. And it was the same when the Romans left Romano Britain. Mm-hmm. Dogs. But
yeah, we fell into a pit.
They talk about the wonderful Roman roads, the baths, the aqueducts, the system of law, all these things. But history will judge the British Empire fairly in hindsight. We're not there yet. We've got some generations to go through yet, die out. in 100 years, and people actually sitting there reading history books go, just a minute, what was so terrible about it? Especially when we look at the state they're in now. So getting back to the original point, America is not our friend. They're one of our biggest single country trading partners. I've got lots of friends in America. I've been to 32 or 33 states, I think it is, over the years, speaking and on business. So I've done all that, and some very good friends, believe me, in America. But they're not our friend. They're good neighbors. We want to be good neighbors. We must be very good neighbors with the United States. But we cannot be bound with them treaty-wise with hoops of steel, because they are now a rogue nation. And the European Union, you can write off, it's crumbling as we see it. You know, France has collapsed socially. Spain has collapsed socially. Italy's in dire debt, and the German economy has gone down the lavatory. So this drawing towards the European Union, like going towards Britain, going now towards the European Union would be like two drunks holding each other up in the street.
That's a really profound, thought-provoking image, actually. I quite like that. No, I'm going to use that at some point. I like that. So you've worked alongside a number of prominent people in British politics. Some are going to be good campaigners. Some are going to have those leadership qualities. If you had to pick from the limited choices we've got now, who would you say would be a good leader for the country, regardless of party, political leanings? If you had to pick someone who you think he or she could lead us out of this mess, who would it be?
Well, it certainly wouldn't be anybody who is in mainstream politics today. There isn't anybody. And I know some of these people personally, of course. Mm-hmm. So the answer is nobody, in my view, with the exception perhaps of Rupert Lowe. Perhaps. There isn't anybody else. But if you remember things looking so dark in the Jim Callaghan days and in the late 1970s, Margaret Thatcher came out of nowhere. She wasn't on the front burner. Nobody had ever heard of her. She suddenly manifested herself. And I know she made mistakes, and I was a very severe critic of some of those mistakes that she made. But I can tell you what, the 1980s, if you were prepared to get out of bed and work, and if you wanted to commit to your family's improvement, you couldn't have lived in a better time than the 1980s. Because she set the scene. She prioritized as best she could, with some very left-wing people in her own government, by the very nature of the Conservative Party being broadly left-wing. She did not a bad job. So somebody could come left field. There could be somebody we don't know, somebody that we haven't seen. If it's not Rupert Lowe, I don't think there's anybody knocking on the door.
It's an interesting point, and it's very profound for obviously people who are interested in the political future of the UK as well. On that point, I'd like to say a massive thank you, Godfrey, for your time today and your insights. It's been really interesting picking your brains, so thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Dean. Great pleasure.
Thank you, sir. You take care.
As most of you know, my work is very heavily independently research-based. And I get my information from all over the world. It would help if you press the subscribe button and the little bell next to it, because the more subscribers I have, the more likely it is that international independent research institutes will share their material with me. It's most helpful, and then of course I automatically share it with you. So surprise, won't cost you anything. Thank you very much.